Off Limits is the money podcast that blows up stereotypes, showing you that managing money doesn't have to be hard.
We want you to thrive, not only with your money, but in every part of your life.
What you will get out of this podcast is real, relatable, and relevant tips and strategies that you can apply today. Hi, I'm Donald Raymond, and this is
Christine Spiak. We are money coaches, business owners, and colleagues who are passionate about helping you become more of who you are. So if you're ready, join us.
Well, good morning, Christine. We're
talking about budgeting. But we want you to give this episode a chance because really what a budget is, it's your freedom to choose what you want in life. If you're right now listening to us and you're already starting to feel some physical emotions just by hearing the word, maybe you're getting a little sweaty and maybe a little tightness in your chest, maybe some butterflies in your stomach. It's okay. Just take a deep breath, let it go with an open mind, learn the reasons why you can budget.
You know, you use the term open mind, and yeah, you know, we hear so many people get so anxious and nervous when it comes to this B word, this budget, right? And but you said open-minded, and so before we even dive into this, before we go any farther, we really just need to accept, don't we, that anyone can have a budget. It doesn't matter what your income level is, right? If you make a lot of money, you just have more to plan with, and if you make a little bit, it's even more important that you plan that money so that it gets spent where it needs to be spent. And that's really what we're saying is this budget is a plan. We want to go in fully informed. And if you can't accept that, then really the rest of this episode isn't for you. We're going to be talking about exactly how you budget, how you use the money, you know, very, very specifically getting into the weeds, into the details of what a budget is and what it could do for you. And if you don't think you can budget, then this won't work for you. And we only say that, we only put that out there because so often people have the response to this topic of budgeting that if I made more money, I could budget. If I could afford to, I could budget. And
we hear that all the time.
All the time, right? You hear it. I know you do. And I hear it too. And you guys have probably thought it, you know, as you're listening, you might be thinking it right now. And we want to kind of encourage you, I think, that you absolutely can. You can budget a little bit of money. You can budget a lot of money. And really, I just want to say you can't afford not to budget. Budgeting is so critical. Planning is so critical. You wouldn't go out on a road trip unless you just wanted to be spontaneous without a plan at a minimum of what direction you were going to go and maybe for how long you were going to go. So at a minimum, we just want to say and suggest that we have to accept the basic premise that anyone can budget at any income level. And knowing that, we've put together an episode here that's going to kind of cover the who, what, where, when, why, and how of a budget. And we're going to start with the what, right, Christine?
Yeah, it's the best place to start. Like, what is a budget?
Right.
Maybe you have a misconception of what actually a budget is. You know, we already talked about the dreaded B word, and I already mentioned the word freedom. But what we're asking you to do today is shift your perspective. Take our challenge. Say, yes, I can budget. And I'm going to take the next however many minutes this episode is to learn exactly how to do that. Something that we want you to know that a budget is it's not a set it and forget it. You know, I tell my clients it really is a living and breathing document that you're creating, whether it's an electronic document or a physical document, because life changes. There's big swings in life and your money changes right along with it.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? When I work with clients, it's an ongoing thing, right? Where I'm going to teach you how to do it. But this budget that you're going to be interacting with, you're going to interact with it every day, you know, and it doesn't have to be super detailed and super fine tuned. And, you know, we'll talk more about some of the other details. I usually encourage people to start with fewer categories and not break it down super granular and detailed because it's just too cumbersome. It's too much. You can't handle every transaction doesn't need its own category. But Christine's right. You know, what is the budget? The budget is it's that tool. It's that plan. It's that map. It's that guide that's going to show you where you're going for a given period of time. And that's why it's so important that you revisit it because we know life happens, right? I mean, life just keeps happening. And so your life may change day to day. Your needs may change day to day. You may have unknown expenses pop up. You may have planned expenses that go up or go down. And so you want to make sure that you can make those adjustments. So definitely it is a living, breathing thing, right? It's not a set it and forget it. If you're operating off a budget that you made 5 years ago, my guess is it's probably not going very well. Right? There's no way that a budget from 5 years ago is still the same today. It just doesn't work that way. Your income changes, your needs change, prices change. We've been going through inflation for a while. Everybody's been feeling, you know, the impact of that. And so we've all had to make adjustments. Doesn't matter how much money you're making or not making. We just have to make those adjustments. That's the only way that this can work.
Yeah. So for our family, we've been budgeting every month since June of 2017, and no two budgets have looked the same. It doesn't mean they're drastically different every month, sometimes more than others, but Every month you're getting in there and you're touching your budget, you're assigning your money where you want it to go. And that's really the bottom line. It's putting a plan in place for your money. So you have that solid foundation, you have a security, you have the plan, so you can live out your dreams.
That's it, isn't it? So you kind of just jumped into our next category here. You said live out your dreams, and that's going to fit very nicely in with the why. Why budget? Why bother? So we know what it is, but why? Some people would say, why do that to yourself, right? It's handcuffs. I can't spend. You're just telling me that I can't use any of my money. And that's definitely not it. You called it a spend plan. You called it freedom earlier. And but you also called it scary. And I think maybe the scary comes from this piece, because when we start identifying the whys, why do we want to budget? Well, we're saying that we want you to budget, and we budget because it helps us achieve our goals. It helps us get to where we want to go financially. Some other people, you might be one of those, are thinking, if I budget, I don't get the things that I want. So yours might, you might be a why not to philosophy. And so hopefully we can share a few ideas here that help you see this from a different perspective. So Christine, why do we need to make a budget?
I mean, off the top, it's like your permission to say yes. So if you're the type of person who maybe you have a goal, maybe it's a trip you want to take to Europe, or even, across the country, stay local. Maybe it's just always in the back of your head of something that you're never going to be able to afford because you don't have the system in place to be able to take that vacation one day. Maybe it's not as big as a vacation. Maybe it's something smaller that you just think, I can't give into that because I need my money going to food and utilities and shelter and transportation. But when you step back and you create these goals and you put a system in place where you can divvy up your money into your dreams, then you will achieve them.
So you're stepping right into the how, and I love that. And I think to really just capture the why.
Yes, let's go back.
It's what drives us, right? Why do it? So I think you budget to motivate the intent, the habit, and the discipline to set goals. And those goals become your why to budget. So I kind of reversed it there, right? So a lot of times you guys will hear me say that actions need to be aligned with your goals and support of your values, right? So we align our actions with our goals. Those goals need to support our values. So if I work that philosophy backwards for the why, I need to have a why, right? And so what are those things that I want first? Some of those wants help me start to identify and define a why. And if I have a why, I can start to make a plan for how to achieve a goal that supports my values. And if all of that exists, now I need a roadmap. I need to know how to get there, right? And not all, but a large chunk of that goal is going to be a financial burden, right? Or a financial responsibility, I'll say, because it doesn't need to be a burden, even if it feels like that sometimes. And that roadmap is your budget. So the why, in this case, why budget? Well, it's so that you can achieve your goals, which are built around your whys, your drive, your wants, your dreams. That's
it's
what the
putting
why
money
is to
behind.
me.
Yeah. The bottom line is it's putting money behind what is most important to you.
That's right. You jumped into the how a little bit already. Yeah. So let's jump into the how. How do we do it? Where do we get started?
Well, there's different ways you can budget. So we're going to share with you a few of the different ones, just so you know that there's options out there. But we will speak of one way that is really dialed in and goes into great detail to help you with that next step of how do you do it?
That's right, Christine. There's lots of different ways to budget, right? And I'm sure that everybody at some point in their lives and your lives have done something, right? We've all tried. Maybe we've tried and failed over the years, and that's okay. One of the things that you'll hear on this show a lot is we want to fail. We want to fail forward. Failing is learning, and if we're not failing, then we're not trying. And so it's good to have those experiences to figure out what works, what doesn't work. There's 3 kind of popular budgeting suggestions out there, strategies out there, and one of which, like Christine said, we'll focus on the most. This first one is a 50-30-20, and it's just your needs, your wants, your savings broken out over percentages of your income. So whatever your income is, 50% goes to needs, 30% to wants, and 20% to savings. That gets you to 100%. A simpler way to do it might be the 80-20 rule, right? Where we take 80% for spending and then 20% goes into savings. And then, hopefully that repeated over your lifetime gets you where you need to be. But it might not be specific enough. And so we're going to spend more time on this zero-based budget philosophy and give you some tools and some different strategies and just tips on how to build a zero-based budget and why we think it may be the better choice for almost everybody out there.
I like how you said almost. So
Yeah.
there is no one size fits all for everyone for everything in life. So as you listen to this episode, watch YouTube videos, read articles about budgeting, choose what is best and right for you and your family. I'm a very detail oriented person. So when I first learned the zero-based budget, it immediately resonated with me. And I loved having that kind of control over every dollar that was coming into our household that month, of assigning every dollar a job, if you will, of where that money was going to go. At the outset, every budget is a period of time. So you can look at that period of time based on a month. You can look on it based on payday. So if you get paid once a month, writing a budget monthly, that might work really well for you. If you're getting paid twice a month or bi-monthly, maybe you feel better about looking at the period of time for each paycheck so you can have greater control over where your money is going for that period of time. Again, there's no right or wrong. What works best for you?
No, that's right. And just speaking from personal experience, what we've always done is we've tried to have a budget that we know fits an annual plan, if you will. And so you look at what your expected annual income is, or maybe you take your whole emergency fund and you figure out what that time period looks like, and then you break that up into even pieces, and you can kind of manage within those pieces. And what I found is for us, and this is kind of unique to us, so this isn't going to be one of those popular things you can go out there and find, but we'll give you guys some tools that'll help you kind of put this together for yourselves and figure out, again, just try all these different ideas on and see which one works best for you. But for us, what that did is it took us away from that kind of paycheck to paycheck mentality. All of a sudden, we were making long range plans. We were making, semi-annual, annual, 3-5-year plans, and looking at what that cash flow and that income potential looked like over time, and then breaking that up into pieces and building these spend plans, these budgets based on, those larger amounts, and always checking back in so that we don't get off the rails. And what that did is it really took us away from payday. We haven't focused on a payday in years as a result of that. We know what our means look like because we're constantly checking in with the bigger picture, and then we're living in a smaller piece of that total. And everything is always built on percentages. We don't budget anything based on the actual dollar amounts. Now, the dollar amounts come out of the percentages, but the 100% is just so much easier to break up, right? 10% here, 5% there. It's just easier to do it that way. And now that we have all this history, we can go back and say, hey, our food budget is roughly 12% of our income. So we're just going to move 12% of this bigger picture over here toward food. How we break that up, some of it goes to groceries, some of it goes to fast food. And seasonally, we kind of know what that looks like. In the summertime, we eat out more. During the school year, we eat out less. And so we can kind of make those adjustments as we go. But we're never relying on a payday. And so again, this idea of freedom, we build these plans based on how we want to live our lives, right? Or how our lives are lived, I guess is a better way to say it. It's certainly not a greed thing. It's not a prideful position to be in. It's a comfortable position to be in. As long as the income is coming and we pursue more income, even if I'll tell you that we were doing this on a lower income, but scenario first. We started budgeting when we were at our lowest income ever. And we had the most success we've probably ever had at our lowest income. And we were happy and everything was covered and we didn't have stress because we weren't paying bills. So I say that to say that you can absolutely apply these techniques and these strategies, and you can build, I think it's another reason to build your budget based on percentages. Because if you said, my power costs me $100 a month and I don't have $100 a month, how are you going to pay the power bill? But if you know that your power is a certain percentage of your income, it helps you prioritize and make sure that percentage and that $100 bill is covered before you decide to do that extra thing, or before you make the decision to go take the extra trip or drive the car the extra mile or say yes to that thing that you just feel like you should say yes to, but it comes with a little bit of cost and you just don't have the margin in your budget. It helps you prioritize those things.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I think that people are going to hear your explanation of looking at a period of time that's a year or greater than a year and really resonate with it and be like, oh, I've never thought about doing it that way before. Let me jump into that. And I also think, on the other hand, there's going to be people that hear it and be like, a year? How? I can't even get control over this paycheck. How can I even begin thinking that far out? I'm not somebody who thinks long-term in the future because that's overwhelming to me. So if you kind of fall into that category of, before I can look at a year, I need to just look at this paycheck. A great place to start, doesn't matter if you want to attack the year or if you want to attack just the current paycheck that you're getting this next pay period, is to do some cash flow planning. And we're going to share a document with you in the show notes of this episode where it is a template. You'll have to copy it into a new document so you can actually use it. But this template will give you a picture of where all of your money has been going. And we recommend you looking at it from a lens of, in the last 3 months, how much did I spend on food and clothing and utilities and rent or my mortgage? Gather all of this data first. There's a saying, awareness is curative. So once you're aware, right? You can then change your path and move in the direction that you want to be headed in. So once you have this information for a 3-month average, what you're spending on all of these different categories, now you can start looking at the money that you're making in the future and plan out where you want it to go. So whether you're planning it based on percentages or you're planning it based on dollar amount, whichever works better for you, whatever resonates more with you, then that's the way you move forward. Something to take into account are the people who have variable income. They're living on commissions, or they get bonuses throughout the year and they, use that bonus money as part of their overall annual spending. You have to take that into account too if your income is volatile by any means.
And that volatility can be in different periods of time too, right? Like you said, it might be a quarterly bonus, it might be a monthly bonus, it might be an annual bonus, it might be semi-annual, we don't know, right? And so there's lots of different scenarios out there, so you do have to figure out what works for you. That was really, that variable income is what pushed us into this annual planning. It's because we knew that throughout the year, we were going to have these little pockets of time, and they were different for both of us. We were both on different pay period cycles. Our bonuses were paying out differently because our companies that we were working for were on different fiscal years. Some of the spend side of things, I was contracted, and so I was keeping track of my taxes. She had the withholdings coming out of every paycheck, and so that was taken care of. So we had that already, over on the side. But of course, we were going to have to figure all that out at the end of the year. And then bonuses were paid out at different times, different amounts for different reasons. And companies restructure that all the time, right? One year it's based on this performance metric, the next year it's based on this one. And so sometimes it can be very challenging even in that environment. And I come from a sales commission background as well, where I could sort of write my own paycheck and I kind of could keep track of it. And I knew what percentage of the sales I was going to be getting. But when were those different periods of time going to be closing? How were they going to factor in the margins? And then how were they going to pay out the bonus structure that month based on the performance of the whole business unit? All of those variables kept changing. So it can get kind of muddy. So you don't want to get, as Christine said, this can be, very anxiety inducing maybe for some. And you definitely want as much data as you can get. But you also want to keep it reasonable, get the data, but don't get lost in the data, use it so that you can build that plan and make it something that you can actually lean into and leverage going forward, and don't use it as, a lot of times this happens. Somebody will look at the amount of income they have coming in and the amount of expenses they've had over the last 90 days, and they'll say, I'm spending more than I make. How am I going to make this work, right? And so that's when you start leaning into, we're going to spend, I should say, probably the most time in this how category. I think it's fair to say.
It really is the biggest.
This is where the meat and potatoes are. Maybe we should have saved this or farther down, but who knows? That's okay. But so if you're in that place, that's when you really need to start looking at what within those expenses is optional. What are you spending more on that you could spend less on? What are you spending that you might not need to spend, or you wouldn't spend first if you prioritized it? And that's where that prioritizing really comes into play. So again, like Christine said, whether you're doing percentages or you're just divvying up the money, paying the bills and looking at the totals down to the penny, which absolutely you should do, because we are working on a zero-based budget. And the one thing we haven't said about the zero-based budget is that working to a zero eliminates the need for any kind of lending or credit type of vehicle, any kind of credit product, right? So because it's a zero-based budget, we're not even considering putting something on a credit card. We're not considering taking out a loan to pay something off. We're not considering debt consolidation into these things, right? So what we're doing is we're taking the amount of available cash for that given period, a month, 2 months, a week, a day, whatever it is, and we're saying, I can afford to spend this much money, and then when that money's gone, that's it. The spending is over, right? So there's an element of responsibility and discipline that kind of develops as you work into this method of spend. But that's going to be true with any of these strategies, because if we're always basing the plan off 100% of the income, then depending on your time frame, your time period, you figure out what the income is, and when the money's gone, the budget's over. So you got to make sure those needs are met first.
Right. So simply put, a zero-based budget is your income less your expenses equals zero. So at the end of it, it doesn't mean we don't want you to have no money in your checking account or no money in a savings account. It just means that every dollar in that income period you have assigned to expenses, food, utilities, shelter, clothing, wants, setting aside money for travel, maybe paying down debt, and savings, right? So we talk about, and we will talk about in a future episode, sinking funds and how saving can set you up for success. And we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of that here, but by budgeting every dollar into different funds and different accounts, into different categories, if you will, that's how you're setting yourself up for success. So a couple of things I want to backtrack on that Donald mentioned that I think is worth talking about a little bit further is all of that example he gave about the variable income and bonus and when your bonus gets paid out. All of that really trips people up, and it makes it very confusing and very complicated for them to even want to take this step into budgeting, because they just don't even know when that money is coming in and how to work with it once it does. The next thing that I think is important to mention too is when we talked about creating your cash flow plan, it's really important that you don't have analysis paralysis. Now that you have all this information on the cash flow plan, use it to fuel you moving forward. Don't be critical. Don't be judgmental of yourself. Don't feel shameful or embarrassed of, man, I've been spending this much money in my food category or my vacation category, or wow, I'm really spending a lot of money on clothing. Wait a minute, I thought I was a giver, but looking back the last 3 months, I really haven't given any money to anyone. Don't be critical of yourself. Just use the information to put you on the path towards where you ultimately want to end up.
Yeah, and get it wrong. Guess the like you said, all of the dynamics, all of the variables around the income and how you're paid or how your employer makes changes. Those are just givens. It's going to happen. It's constantly going to be in flux. Your income is going to change. It's going to go up. It's going to go down. You're going to have job changes. You're going to get promotions. You might get demotions. All that stuff is just going to happen. And you may even make decisions to step down and take a lower income position because it's just more fulfilling. You just enjoy doing the work more. And all of those things are okay. We just need to plan around them. So yeah, none of this is none of what we're saying, and none of the practice of budgeting and figuring out your income and planning should ever be done with a critical mentality, right? It's just information. We're just trying to make better decisions and make a plan that's going to work within a set of criteria, a set of given knowns, an understanding of what you have. So guess what your income's going to be if it's that inconsistent and you're really just not sure. Take 90 days, 3 months. It's always a great period of time to look at, typically, and you can. Most people are going to get paid somewhere in 90 days, and then you can just roll that forward, right? You just keep that current 90 days with you. You're always looking back. That's your review mirror. You're looking back over the last 90 days. You start projecting out farther and farther and farther, right? Looking out the windshield with just a little bit more confidence. You look back and you make some plans and you make some adjustments, and your numbers get a little bit more dialed in. And then you start making that first kind of stretch goal, and then you achieve a milestone along the way, and you give yourself the pat on the back, and you hit the next milestone. And then before you know it, you've achieved that first kind of long-term goal. Maybe it was only 90 days out, right? But you've never planned that far ahead before. And now all of a sudden you've achieved a 90-day goal. Well, that gives you the confidence to go achieve a 180-day goal, and then a 1-year goal. And then, you can go out, you can see how that just keeps pushing you forward. But you can do all that with just a 90-day history and just confidence in how to make those subtle adjustments along the way. We, in our household, and what I typically teach is you want to make 2 concerted efforts, 2 focused, intentional efforts every month for next month's budget. It's always going to include looking at your 90 days of income and expenses as a reference point, but you're going to make next month's budget at the mid-month period. So we're going to do a mid-month check-in, and then we're going to do kind of an end-of-month cleanup. And so at the mid-month check-in, we're actually checking in on this month's budget, and then we're making next month's budget. And then at the end of the month, we're cleaning up any overs, unders from that month. And you might have to wait until the second day of the month, the next month, in order to get these transactions into your budgeting tool, whether you're using a spreadsheet or an app or a bank, a bank program that allows you to put these different charges or these expenses into categories. It may take a couple of days for those transactions to process, depending on who you're with. So let those transactions process and post, and then get them into their categories and get everything to zero. And then you can make little subtle adjustments, for that new month that you're in when you do that activity. So these are 2 very intentional, maybe 15-minute exercises every month. It'll take a little longer when you're first getting started, but you could put that focus in. And then the rest of the month, you just want to be checking in every week, every day. We use an app, and so it's always on my phone, and it updates constantly. And because of that, I check in on it regularly, probably multiple times a day, because there's just always information there that I can update. And for some people, that's going to be a very valuable tool. For other people, that might be very irritating or might even be intimidating. And so you don't want to use that, right? You want to get to a frequency that's going to work for you. Christine, what's your frequency look like in that scenario?
Yeah, so we're jumping out a little bit to the when and the where, how we're actually doing it. But I think it's important because it really is all part of this overall how. I do it every pay period. So every 2 weeks is when I really like to look at our money, because again, I told you earlier in this episode, I'm a very detail-oriented person. And I think doing it this way has allowed us to stretch our money as far as humanly possible. Even to, yesterday I had extra money left over, extra actual cash left over from our groceries this week, and something came up that I hadn't budgeted for, and I used that cash to pay for it. I didn't have to rework anything or think about where this was going to come from, that I was going to pay for the service that I got. So I really like looking at a 2-week period.
Yeah.
But again, you have to do what is right for you. Overall, when we talk about the how, we're looking at first and foremost the expenses that we have to pay for in order to survive, right? We're thinking about our transportation, our utilities, our mortgage or our rent, our home, our food. Maybe we have a health problem and our medicine is very important, or seeing a doctor on a monthly basis. Like, we need to make sure all of our needs are being met when we are writing our budget for whatever time period that we are writing it for. That is so critically, crucially important that we're setting out with our needs and then following up with our wants.
Yeah, and that's where I think the percentages become a really good tool. Build your budget, use your numbers, figure out what they are. But the percentages, they kind of have a natural byproduct where it's so easy to see that a larger percentage of something is being spent in a category, right? As opposed to which number is bigger and how does that represent a bigger or smaller portion of my income. If you can put them into percentages, it's something that we've all been taught, and it's something that everybody just kind of intuitively knows. And it helps with that priority, right? If we're not prioritizing the right things, and our budget is skewed as a result of that, then our needs may not be covered. And that may be the first adjustment that you need to make, is making sure that those needs are covered within your means, within your income, before any of the wants start getting funded. And sometimes those can get out of order simply just because they're a want, right? We want what we want. We're all human.
Right.
And we want things, and we see things, and we have impulses. And sometimes we don't have the discipline to say no, or the responsibility to say no. And some people, I was talking to somebody the other day that said, I'm tired of saying no, and I don't have the energy to say no anymore. And when my kids want something, sometimes I just cave and I say, okay. And I know we can't afford it, but I just don't have it in me to say no anymore. I've said no too much, and
the struggle is real.
The struggle's real. So this is life, right? And we learn from those things. And again, I think, talking through that scenario specifically, budgeting and planning and being proactive became the motivation and the encouragement that this individual needed to be able to say no. And it wasn't a no anymore. Right now, it was a family plan, and the whole family knew that this is the plan going forward. And once the money in this category is gone, I don't even need to ask, because the answer is an automatic no. It's not right. That, somebody's being a bad guy, or they don't love me, or I'm not going to get what I want. You bring your whole family into this discussion, which I think is critical in this how category, that anybody in the household that's affected by this budget, which is everybody in the household, needs to be part of this discussion. They should all be involved.
I think what happens sometimes, at least conversations I've had with people, they think that telling their kids no, their kids are going to think, well, we can't afford it. We must be in a dire financial situation. Right. Or I don't want to say the word budget to my kids because it makes it sound like we can't afford something. I think it's the opposite. I think your example speaks to that. When we have a plan for our money, if what we want to do doesn't fall into that plan, we either change what we want to do, put it off, do it when we can afford it, or we look at it as a way to teach our kids that, hey, if you show a little bit of intentionality, right, and restraint, you can do more things that you want to do because you're actually doing the things that you want to do. And because you're not just doing everything all at once and just throwing everything out the window, then you can participate in the things you want to do. You can cash flow them, so there is no regret afterwards. And it's okay not to be able to do everything. That's what life is. We can't do everything in life.
And there's such an interesting thing too that happens, and I think it happened. We're all built this way, but I've seen it more in my child, Ethan, our son, and just observing other kids, preteens, teens, as they work toward something. And there's this natural, I think, urge, desire as a parent to want to, give your kids as much as possible, make sure they have a better life than we had. I think that's totally normal, totally natural. And to the extent that we can afford to, we should, right? And that's reasonable. But it's interesting what happens when the first time, or even the first few times, and really every time that you encourage and are successful in getting your child or anyone to really earn something, sacrifice something in the pursuit of something else, make a priority out of something. And it doesn't have to be something better, right? So an example, my son needed or wanted a toy, a game that he wanted to play. And we had already spent that month's entertainment budget. And so this is a common conversation in our household. I said, hey, bud, we can buy that next month. But this month, our entertainment budget is depleted. We bought some things early on. There's a couple of subscription services that he has that go into that account. And so that account was tapped out for the month. And so it wasn't a no. It kind of was a not now. But the explanation was, you've spent your entertainment money. We've spent the entertainment money for this month. It's gone. And he just very willingly, because of our dynamic in the household, he accepted that. It was fine. Well, later he went and he got creative. He went home and he found a way to build out of cardboard and, toothpicks and popsicle sticks, this like cheap version of the game. And this was a year ago, he is still playing with that toy. and he doesn't want the game. The thing he built that he sacrificed for and made with his own hands it's more appealing, and now I ask him if he wants it, and he's like, no, I don't want to spend our money on that. I already built it. I don't need it now. So, it's cool what happens when you do say no, but the no becomes an opportunity for something else,
Yeah, I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
I love that so much.
So I challenge anybody to really push themselves out of that comfort zone, because it's easy to say yes, right? It's easy to, throw out the charge card, borrow the money, get the equity loan on the home, do whatever you want, buy the boat, do the thing, and then live in that buyer's remorse. And that's what we're trying not to do. We want everybody to live a highly thriving, successful, fulfilling life. But you won't do that if you're buried in debt. And this budgeting, this planning is really the single most powerful thing that anybody can do to make sure that doesn't happen.
Right. It is so powerful. The reason why, though, people will say, well, I tried it once, I tried it twice, it didn't work, is because there are a lot of factors that go into it. And the first factor is you got to give yourself at least 3 to 4 months to get into a groove with it, to feel like it's not so cumbersome, it's not so hard. The other piece that I find people often leave out is they don't think about just normal household or vehicle maintenance of adding that into their budget. So it's like, oh, I'm going along great, I'm budgeting, all of our needs are met for this month. Well, then it's, oh, I got to replace the tires or the brakes, or it's something else that breaks. And because that hadn't been built into a budget where you're saving money for each month, so when that routine maintenance, right, annual maintenance, or maybe every 2-year maintenance comes up, you haven't saved for it, then it is like that sucker punch. Same thing with your home. If you're a homeowner, to be setting money aside each month for repairs, maintenance, things that break, that's setting yourself up for success. Another thing that people don't really think about when they're writing their budget is what's going on in their lives. So they may know, oh, I got my kid's friend's birthday party coming up, but I didn't quite think about putting that into the budget. Or it's Mother's Day, Father's Day, it's a holiday. I didn't think about putting that into the budget. Or I'm not looking at the calendar, and even though I know I have a colleague's retirement party at the end of the month, I didn't think about budgeting a gift for that event. We really have to look at our lives, not just so, and I told you already, I'm very detail-oriented and focused, right? But we got to zoom out. We have to look at the macro. We have to look at, Donald's been saying all throughout this episode how he breaks it out into a year. I can tell you I never thought about doing that until I met Donald, because I am looking at it every pay period. But I'm looking at it with every pay period with the thought of what is coming down the road. Right. What do we need just for general maintenance? Because we own a vehicle, we own a home, we own a pet, right? A lot of times people don't even think about, oh, well, I buy food, I buy the treats. But then there's an episode that happens and your pet ends up in the vet, and now you got this huge vet bill, and now you're paying for medicine. So we have to plan for these types of events that really end up impacting our money.
And you got to be careful too. You could make the argument, well, that's what the emergency fund is for, but the emergency fund absolutely is for those unknowns and to capture anything that you don't plan for. But that doesn't like open up the door for don't make a plan, right? Like we're just going to pay for it out of the emergency fund. Because if we're following the rules, then we shut everything down and go back to bare bones so that we can replenish the emergency fund as quickly as possible. So really that doesn't do you any good, and it really becomes more painful in that scenario. So we definitely don't want to encourage anybody to use that strategy. Instead, let's get super intentional and super granular with all of the different things that are happening. And even more obvious than the vehicle maintenance and the home maintenance, how many people are planning ahead and setting aside money for Christmas gifts? Some of us do. A lot of people don't. And Christmas is not a surprise. It happens every single year. You're going to buy some gifts. Birthdays. We now have a calendar of birthdays, and we have a gift we need to buy, cards, flowers for something every month of the year. Our family is big enough. We know enough people. We get involved in enough people's lives. There's not a month that goes by that we don't buy a gift for somebody. My son is going to somebody's birthday at least once a month, especially through the summer months. And so there's always going to be that need. And if you're not planning for it, it becomes a budget buster. And all of a sudden you've got this extra expense. And if you don't have that plan in place, and it's okay too, I'll say it this way. If you spend on something that you didn't plan to spend on, that's fine, as long as you can go back to your budget and you have enough room built into it that you can make adjustments so that at the end of the month, you don't go over, right? Something has to come down in order for that expense to get covered if you're going to prioritize it and spend money on it. Otherwise, you're out of balance. All of a sudden, the zero is a negative. It's not a zero-based budget anymore. So that's why we want to just, every 2 weeks, centering this activity around payday or some other frequency that just works for your life is so critical. It's not a set it and forget it. We have to interact with the budget. And so, the how becomes very hands-on. How do we have a budget? How do we make a budget work? You said it takes 3 to 6 months to 4 months to get started, kind of get going, 6 months to get a rhythm. I would say even the whole first year, you're trying to figure it out. You're constantly making those adjustments. And what you learn is that you're never going to get it right. It's always going to need to be adjusted, always going to need to be updated. So I think more than getting it right, it's the acceptance that it's never going to be right. And so you're just always going to be in there kind of tweaking and tuning and making sure that you're making adjustments as that life is kind of happening, and then hopefully being a little bit more proactive next time so that you can capture these things as they happen.
And one way to set yourself up for success with that is every month be budgeting money for a miscellaneous category.
Absolutely.
That can be anything from, very sadly, somebody passed away and you want to send a meal to the family's home or make a donation in their memory. It could be, friends are going out for dinner and a, fun night of entertainment, and that wasn't in our budget, but we want to participate and do that with them. We have money set aside in this miscellaneous category that gives us flexibility each month to not have to feel like we need a crystal ball in order to write a budget. You don't need the crystal ball. You need to have an idea of where your money is going, but there's always, every month, going to be something that pops up that you couldn't plan for because you had no idea it was coming down the pike.
Yeah, and if you don't have enough to fund those categories, then have the confidence to say no. So until you can afford to, don't do those things. Even investing is one of those activities that you don't want to do until you can afford to do it, and that scares a lot of people. But in order to have a successful budget, in order to live within your means, you have to know, and you have to have very clear boundaries around what you can and what you can't do. And if you're living, thinking even the 80-20 rule, I have to live off 80, I have to save 20. What if right now, currently today, you just can't afford to do that with your income, right? So it takes 100% of your income to cover the bills. Well, that is definitely something that needs to be addressed. But if you don't have the 20%, you don't have the 20%. So don't get yourself further into the hole because somebody told you had to save the 20%.
Right.
I want you to save. We want you to save as early and as often and as much as possible, but not if we're going to sacrifice our ability to maintain a zero-based budget. I don't ever want somebody to go into debt because they thought they had to save, right? And I think sometimes that's something that can get confused as well.
And I think if you look at your debt, right, how is that holding you back? It's a really important part of this equation of the budget. So when you're writing out your budget and any debt that you have and you add up those minimum payments each month, I'll just throw a number out there. Let's say it's $1,500 is going towards your debt.
Yeah.
That means that $1,500 can't go towards more saving or XYZ, whatever it may be for you, because so much of your income is going out that rearview mirror into your past versus going forward toward your future when you're looking out your windshield.
Absolutely. Yeah. Those debt payments are going to hold you back, and they're going to keep holding you back. And if you prioritize savings in my previous example, and you continue to go into debt, you're not getting out of debt, and those payments are getting bigger, or they're just continuing. They're never going away. I've had conversations with people that have just accepted that they're going to have as much as $1,000 car payment for the rest of their lives. They just accepted it as an expense. It's either going to be a lease or it's going to be a loan, but they've just accepted it as a fact, as a static point, as a constant in their budgeting. So they plan for that $1,000 every month because they're going to have a car loan. And I think for some people, if they're going to make that decision, that's part of their budget, that's part of their plan. I don't necessarily agree with it. I certainly wouldn't recommend it to anybody. But I think a lot of people.
Challenge yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Challenge yourself.
Yes, challenge yourself. And do you need a car that's costing you $1,000 a month? There may be some scenarios where you've got to drive a particular kind of vehicle for a particular kind of work. But there's others, that same scenario is going to give you some cost advantages when it comes to tax time and being able to deduct that. And so you definitely want to have all the information there as well. And that's getting into a whole different conversation. But yes, try to do and live on less and prioritize what is truly a need, and don't ignore the stuff that we know is happening. If you have a car, it's going to need maintenance. If you have a home, something's going to need to be repaired, replaced. Appliances go bad. It happens, right? If you're working from home, let's talk about that. Here we are both recording from home right now, and we need functioning computers and phones and microphones and different things. And, these aren't products, these aren't tools, electronics that last forever. And technology goes out of date faster than we can keep up with. And so, being able to stay current and have the things that you need, you have to constantly be working ahead of that equation, ahead of that need, so that you can cover it when the need comes.
And I think that's why so many people get tripped up, because they're not thinking ahead, and not because of poor planning, but it's just they're not in that rhythm of this is how I spend my money. They're in the rhythm of I spend today what I make today. And if I can afford the payment of the debt, well, then I can afford the payment of the debt. For us, people are successful, and we have found within our own lives we're successful when we can look ahead and we can plan out what to put our money towards in the future. Because if we're always just living in I can afford the payment, then you're just on this hamster wheel and you're really never getting ahead. And I think that's a really important piece to bring up when we're talking about how with this budgeting, because you got to stop the bleeding. You got to stop all these payments, all of these debts, so you can get off that wheel and move forward.
And to do that, you really have to prioritize. So we're still talking about how, but I've been resisting the urge to jump into the where category this whole time. I think I want to kind of put them together, but the where it's a much shorter category, but I think it's going to speak into the how a little bit. So where, if we unpack this, Christine, and we think about the example that's used a lot of times for like team building exercises and like icebreakers, right? We're going to pretend that nobody at the table knows how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and somebody is going to try to walk them through how to make this peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You've ever heard this? I
have not.
Okay,
but keep going.
Yeah, so this is like an icebreaker thing, like I said, and the task is, Christine, if you've never made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich before, pretend you don't know what bread is, you don't know what jelly, you don't know what a knife is, and I say go get the bread. You don't know what's bread.
What's bread?
Where is it? What does it look like? Right? Yeah. So there's all these like little details, right? So if we're talking about budgeting and we're talking to somebody that just, up to this point, they've been, hey, I'm with you. I get it. I accept the need to do it. I accept the premise that I can do it no matter what my income is. What do I do first? Right? And I think as I'm kind of reviewing our notes in our preparation for this, the where is going to help into the how as to how to really get started, right? And so the first item we have in the where for this budget really is also a how, and it's going to be pen and paper, right? We're going to start pen and paper. We're just going to write some stuff down, and we're going to start tracking. Very simple, very basic. Anybody can do this, right? Write down your income, start tracking your expenses, do a little bit of math. Anybody, this is basic stuff. I will argue that.
And that's how I started.
Yeah,
I don't know how you started, but that exactly.
Pen and paper.
It wasn't even a legal pad. It was literally scrap paper because we have a pile of scrap paper that we use, and I would pull it out each pay period, and I would write down the income for that pay period and start off with our needs, and then what was left, I would divvy up into different categories. Savings being a big category, into the different things that we were saving for, and then the wants. How much do we have this month that we can have fun with?
Is there even any left over, right? And so it's going to depend on where you are in your life and when you're getting started as to what that looked. For me, this was early on. I was making no money. I had way too many expenses. I bought a home too soon. I wrecked my car, so I had to buy a new car. Didn't have to, but I did, right? And so I had all these expenses I was trying to manage. I was living in Virginia at the time, super expensive. And honestly, I don't know how I made it, but I did. And this paper budget was terrible. It was wrong all the time. It always is behind because I'm doing this on paper, right? So it's happening after all of the spending activity. It's never happening before. I'm not looking out because I don't know yet. It's early in my life, and nobody has taught me how to do this. And so I'm frustrated and I'm getting it wrong. And I was behind every single month. I think I refied that first house 4 or 5 times, taking money out every single time. And I thought that's just what you did. There was no podcast. There was no Off Limits podcast to tell me different. I didn't have access to a finance coach. I didn't have any of these tools at my disposal, at least that I knew of. And nobody was telling me to live any differently. They were congratulating me for being able to manage all of this debt, and it never felt good. I was making all these payments, but it never felt good. I mean, when my lawnmower would run out of gas, that was like one of the worst moments because I didn't know how I was going to afford to go buy gas for the lawnmower. I was siphoning out of the gas tank of my car just to mow the grass. And
how can you live to your best self when you're living in that type of...
But you can learn. Right. And I think that's what I did. I think I learned a lot from that experience. So the pen and the paper really taught me a lot. And I think maybe what it taught me was what not to do. But it definitely is how you can get started. And I don't know, Christine, maybe, listening to you, maybe it was a little later in life. You kind of had, some spending activities, some income already going, had been together for a while.
Yeah.
And household was already kind of established. So pen and paper was a little bit easier because those patterns were already in place. I was just getting started. I had moved. I had a new job. I didn't really know what my income looked like. I didn't know what my expenses were going to look like. Like I said, I wrecked my car. I bought a new car. So like all of these things, all of these decisions were made with no data. I just made them. And then I started trying to figure out how to make it work. And I was so bad, I didn't even know I had to keep like the record. I would just sit down and sketch out a budget and throw it away. Right. And then I'd sketch out another budget. Then I'd throw that away. Like there was no history. There was no data. it was bad. It was really, really bad.
Yeah.
So I'm telling you.
I did that in the beginning too. I was throwing them away. I was like, all right, check, got this budget done and threw it away. And then after,
what did I spend
several months of that, I'm like, why am I throwing these away? And then that's when I personally, and I say I, because even though I'm married and my husband and I plan our money together, I am the one who actually does the physical budget. And we talk about it, and we talk about, any kind of big expense we're going to make wholeheartedly, but I'm the one writing it every month. So then I moved to an Excel spreadsheet.
There you go. Step
and that's
2.
Another option.
Yep.
That's another, where are you doing this? It could be a Google Sheet. It could be a spreadsheet, any kind of software that you're familiar with that you can enter in your information and then track it every month.
And
You save it every month. It's there.
Spreadsheets are great because, like you said, they're always there. You can add tabs to them. You can connect them. You can do different, fun things if you know how. Or they can just be static, and but you can always go back. You save it. You can pull it back up. You can pull numbers in from last month into this month. You can make better decisions because you've got all that information. You're not losing anything. And you can update it easier, right? Erasing on a piece of paper, starting from scratch, is really not very convenient. And so if you've got a phone or a tablet or a cheap laptop, you have access to a version of a spreadsheet. And that's kind of the natural sort of next step, I think, in today's world is everybody's going to gravitate toward a spreadsheet at some point. We just all are. Even if we know that there's a service out there that can do it for us, a lot of us are going to try to build our own spreadsheet because we either don't want to pay for it or we don't really understand where the value is as that product relates to our needs. So we end up building our own version first. And I think what you said, though, even though you and your husband are making decisions together, really there is one person, and it's you, that is responsible for and kind of owns this budgeting process. And I think we don't want to slide over that too fast, right?
No, that's a big part of the house.
Somebody is going to be more willing to, I'll say it that way, manage this.
You mean excited for?
Yeah, excited. I mean, some of us do, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Excited to do it.
Absolutely. And I'm that way, right? I enjoy doing it. And so I did spreadsheets for years. When I got married, my wife was not excited at all about the finances. She'll tell you she was terrified when we first got married of just, being in debt, not having enough money. What if we can't pay our bills? Having never done it before, it was very, fear-inducing, and nobody had taught her either. So we kind of navigated and learned that together. I naturally gravitated towards spreadsheets. She was very comfortable using spreadsheets, but very uncomfortable with the money conversation. And so, that spreadsheet was not something that she was interested in ever really seeing. And so we had to get through that. We had to get to a point where there was both trust and understanding and a plan that went forward instead of looking backward. And that really became kind of the thing that took us from being afraid of budgeting and not knowing what we're doing and not really being willing to do it to getting more to, like you, being excited and wanting to and being committed to the process. But I own the budgeting in our household. I manage the finances in our household, short-term and long-term. We all play by the same rules, but the playbook is heavily being influenced and developed by the work that I am doing. But that communication is ongoing. And so I think there's two main takeaways. One, you got to do it together, right? Everybody in the household, we already said this, needs to be involved in this conversation. But two, there's really going to be one person, and I won't say that it won't be one of the kids that takes this over, right? I mean, it could be a teenager in your household that just is a computer whiz and builds you a spreadsheet that they are capable of maintaining, but you really enjoy using, right? So get everybody involved. You don't know who that leader is going to be until you've invited everybody into the conversation.
And how empowering would it be for you to turn that over to one of your kids, right? What is that going to do for them in their future?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what this is about, right? I mean, our generation is only here for a fixed amount of time. And so we're going to do the best we can while we're here. But what kind of condition are we leaving the next generation in? What kind of tools, what kind of preparation have we done for them? And not just them, but, that ripple effect that goes on from their generation to the next, to the next, to the next. How many generations down the road could some of these efforts potentially impact if the communication continues, if the education continues, and we keep moving this needle in the right direction? I don't know. You didn't ask me, but I'm offering my opinion here. That's what excites me about doing things like this. Just getting this information out there. It's just going to be it's going to be so powerful.
Yes. And to me, that's why we do what we do. Mm-hmm. That's why we're so intentional about this and so focused on it, because it's not just for making our lives better today. No. It's for that generational change and wealth building, that the possibilities are limitless when you take the time and you're a little diligent today, you show a little restraint today, how that plays out and just ripples through. Because if you kind of like reverse that ripple and you think backwards for a minute, everything you learned about your money came from your parents or the people who influenced you, which came from their parents. That's and the people who influenced them, right? So if we can change our ripple to have a positive effect, then that's just going to keep going beyond our wildest dreams and imaginations.
And everybody has a different story. And so, I'm glad you said it that way, because if somebody's picturing, well, sure, if your great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was good with money and he passed a lot of money down, a lot of good habits to the next generation, well, of course you guys are financial coaches and you're good with money, but that's not my experience. So, I don't have any family money coming into me. I haven't received any kind of inheritance. My folks didn't receive any kind of inheritance. If anything, the generations prior to, as I was a kid growing up, I watched them become financial burdens to our family. And maybe that's getting too personal, but we saw that happen as children. I have two sisters, and we all watched our family struggle to support the ongoing and increasing medical needs of our parents who did not have a financial plan that was going to take care of them in their later years. They just didn't plan ahead. They made it every day. I just need to make it today. I just want to make it today. And there was nothing wrong with that for them. And we got through that. But if I look at that and I say, I don't want that to be my son's reality, and I don't want that to be his son's reality. And if that trend is a downward trend, right, then what changes can I make so that it turns and goes the other way?
Right.
And how could we, make the adjustment? So if you are somebody that has a lot of bad examples in your family tree, that doesn't mean that you have to be that way. You can change. You can make the decision to behave differently, and you can absolutely change how your family views money. And we're talking about a financial philosophy here, right? We've talked about that before. But what does that mean for you, and how are you going to make those adjustments? I think the budget is really where it starts. So we've talked about pen and paper. We've talked about spreadsheet. And now moving forward with technology, there's apps, right? We can download an app, and it's, you heard me say several times already, there's an app that I use that I interact with routinely, at least every day, or I'll say every couple of days. Maybe I don't pull it out every day, but I'll pull it out every couple of days, and I'll make sure that all the transactions are in the appropriate place. And the apps make it just very convenient and easy. We're all on our phones anyway, so spend 15 seconds and track your money, right? Like let's be intentional. Let's make a priority around our budgeting and our behaviors around budgeting. Are there any apps that you like or that you've used, Christine, that you would recommend?
So this is really your wheelhouse, because I am still using my, it's now a Google Sheet. I transitioned from Excel spreadsheet to Google Sheets, but technology is not my wheelhouse. And while I can fully admit that and appreciate that it works for other people, and I love that people can embrace it, I have not embraced any of the budgeting apps that are out there. And I know you have, so I'd like to turn this part really over to you.
Yeah, so I will gladly accept, because you're right. Technology is definitely my thing. I'm surrounded by it. I love it. I use it all the time. And you just heard me talk about it again, how I pull out my phone and manage our budget on an app. So that app is EveryDollar. It's an app that's marketed as the most popular budgeting app in the world. Now, whether or not that's true, I can neither confirm nor deny, but it's available with a membership subscription to Ramsey Solutions. So if you're somebody that has ever been through FPU or has ever purchased a membership to their services, you will get the EveryDollar app as part of that service, as well as some other tools that kind of complement that app and allow you to get more value out of those tools. And they kind of speak to that annual planning that I was talking about earlier. There's an annual plan, there's a retirement plan, something that depending on your age would take you out many years. If you're on the earlier side, just getting started in your 20s, you're going to make a 45-year plan potentially, right? And I mean, who can look out that far? So
is this planning all within the EveryDollar app?
So it's a secondary app that's available in sort of a suite of apps that's all within Ramsey Solutions. So once you have a membership, you have access to, I think it's 4 different applications, one of which is EveryDollar. And in the insights and the planning side of that, there's another tool where you can build out a retirement plan.
Okay.
Which is really cool.
So just in the EveryDollar, that is you're just using for your
just for budget. Yeah. EveryDollar. Okay. We talked about Give EveryDollar a Job, building a zero-based budget. That's what EveryDollar is. The EveryDollar app is a zero-based budgeting tool, and you build your plan before you spend the first dollar. And that plan gives an assignment to every one of those dollars. So you can kind of see where the name came from. But it's a great app. I don't necessarily endorse the app, but it is available. It is one that we use in our household. So I can say that it works, and it works for us. It is one that I've recommended to several clients that they have used and had success with. And then there's other people that just, they're not necessarily app friendly, or they found another app that has worked better for them. So my only advice is find something that works. That's kind of how we started the episode. Was there's lots of different ways you can do this. There really is no right or wrong way, as long as you accept some kind of foundational principles and rules, right? And we said right out of the gate that one of the things we have to accept is that everybody can budget. You can make a budget, and that budget can work for you. And so you have to accept that first. Another app would be Mint. Mint is part of the Intuit suite. So if you've ever heard of TurboTax, then you've heard of Intuit. And Intuit offers an app and a service, both available on your device, mobile device, and through a website, where you can track you can build and track a budget into categories of spending online or with the app, and that's Mint by Intuit. And then there's another tool that kind of complements any of these that you can use as a standalone, or you can use it as just as another layer that allows you to kind of get into more detail and really understand where your spending is going, and that's Rocket Money. And so if you have a Rocket Loan, which is owned by Quicken Loans, then you have access to Rocket Money. And even if you don't, you can open up a free account and download the Rocket Money app. And it has some pretty powerful AI, that is artificial intelligence, running in the background that will go through and review all of your spending patterns, everything historical, all the way back as far as you have transactions available for viewing with your bank. and it will tell you where all of your spending is going and make suggestions. So it's very intuitive. And one of the things that they are known for, or that they promote the most, which I found personally valuable, I checked it out just so I understood it a little bit better. And I was able to go in and filter out any subscription services. And so the way that it knows it's a subscription is it looks at a pattern of spending. And so if you have a recurring charge that's happening with the same vendor on the same day, whether that's weekly, monthly, annually, however you want to view that spend pattern and look for those regular payments coming out, it will give you that feedback, and it will show you how much you're spending, where, who that vendor is, or at least what the description is in the charge line. And then you'll have a very consolidated list of exactly how many subscriptions you have. And it might be something that would be eye-opening if you've started accumulating charges, if you have a household with several teenagers who are adding services to their devices. It might be very eye-opening if those charges are tied to your account, and all of a sudden you see this list of subscriptions that you may have just been paying the bills and not realized you had. And so even if that's not your scenario, it's worth paying attention to. We talked recently in season 1 about how subscriptions can, especially today, can sneak up because they're so easy to free trial, and then the charges begin, and the charges are very small, so they don't hurt very much. And all of a sudden, one charge turns into 2, turns into 10, turns into 2 or 3 or 4 years of spending activity that maybe you got value out of, but maybe you could have avoided or reduced some. And so this is just another way to do that, a way to use technology.
So let's pause here for a moment, because I feel like we've given so much information that I don't want people to feel like, man, now I just have analysis paralysis, which is something I mentioned earlier in this episode, right? If you are listening to all of these options and your head is spinning, like, I don't even know which one to start with, just start with that pen and paper.
Pen and paper.
Take your first month's budget, jot it down. Like I said, it could be scrap paper. It doesn't even have to be a fancy legal pad. And just start. Oftentimes, right, putting on the sneakers is the hardest part to going out and doing that run, because once you're out there, your legs are moving, you're going, you're moving forward. But it's like all these excuses of why I can't even get my sneakers on today to get out there for that run. That's what's holding you back. So don't put excuses in front of you at this point. We've gone over a lot of information. We want to give you that information because we want to set you up for success. But in doing so, if you're feeling paralyzed in this moment, the takeaway is be intentional, plan where you want your money to go, be diligent, write the budget, stick to it as best as you can, right? Yep. We know we're going to stumble, and, Donald says it often, fail forward. You're going to miss things. You're going to under budget. You're going to over budget. It's okay. Give yourself permission to say progress over perfection. I'm doing it today, and I'm going to get better. I have written, and I would have to do the math. Like I said, ever since June of 2017 until today, when we're filming this, we're actually filming it in June of 2023. All of those budgets I have written are, to me, very empowering, because I've helped to set my family up for financial success. We have that foundation. We don't have any debt, including our mortgage. We have an 8-month emergency fund in the bank. And it goes back to because we started budgeting in June of 2017. We would not be where we are today if we didn't start budgeting. And that's the point. And I hope what you are hearing from this, your budget gives you such freedom to choose. So as we kind of round out this episode, we talked about the where, we talked about the how, the why, the what, and Donald even did mention the when within, talking about the how. It really is important that you get out ahead of it. You're not doing it on June 30th for July 1st, budget. You really are spending time. He mentioned a mid-month check-in, and then again at the end of the month that you're finalizing everything for the next month. Spend time working on the budget, and then choose a frequency that is right for you.
Yeah, it's critical. And I think also within the when, and you just said this, but when do you get started? Right? No. So when's the best time to plant a tree, right? So you've shared that quote with us, right? The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. But the second best time is now. Right now. So when do you start making a budget? You've had some success, some failure in the past. You've tried it. It hasn't stuck for whatever reason. Just try again. Just get started now and start simple. Start small. The best thing about it, so Christine, you said, so that's 6 years if I did the math right? 17 to 23, June to June, 6 years, 12 months a year, budget every month, 72 budgets, give or take.
Yeah, except I do it every pay period.
Okay, right, so times 2, so it's 144. So we've got 144, wow, right. 144 budgets that you've written and you've updated and you've managed. How many of them, I know what the answer is for me, every single one of my budgets is wrong. How many of your budgets was right the day that you wrote it?
Yeah,
never.
You already answered it.
It's never right, and that's the point, right? So not that the intent is to get it wrong, but it's okay to get it wrong. It's expected to get it wrong. It's what it is it's a direction. It's a guide. It's it's telling you what the plan is going forward, but knowing that you're going to have to make adjustments.
I want to word it that way. I don't want to word it as all 144 of these budgets have been wrong. What I want it to, the message that I want people to hear is that you're always making adjustments.
Yep.
You don't have a crystal ball. You're never going to be able to budget for everything. But if you have that miscellaneous, if you have money in the bank to help cover you when something comes up that you didn't plan for or couldn't plan for,
you're better off.
That's your foundation, right? That's why you're successful with your money.
So let me ask you this question. Because the point is not that we're getting it wrong. The point is that we're learning, right? We're making progress. So we shared a quote several episodes ago. This is in season 1, and I've shared it with countless others. But it's make a small change, learn from it, make a bigger change, learn from that, repeat, right? So in the same kind of mentality of when should you get started? You should get started now. What should you do? You should do something simple, something small. Then learn from that and try take on a little bit more, and then learn from that and keep going. Let me ask, how much better was last month's budget than your first budget?
Oh, infinitely.
Yeah, you couldn't even hardly measure or compare the two.
Right.
So while you will never be perfect, right? Progress over perfection, you will learn, you will adjust, you will get better. These budgets will become more accurate over time, and you'll just find ways to kind of live within your means and within your set of circumstances, living the life that you choose to live, the way that you choose to live it within the income means that you have, and how you can capture that and package it in a successful way that gives your family, meets your family's values, and also allows you to move forward with your financial progress. So that really is the takeaway, right? We want to make those intentional efforts to keep practicing, go through iterations, know that we're going to do a bunch of them, and know that we're just going to constantly get better and better at this.
The budget is you're putting a system in place, so it doesn't matter if you get a gigantic pay raise or a pay cut. You have the system in place, and you can adapt to whatever you're earning.
Yep, 100%.
Well, why don't we go into our quote and our action step and the resources we're giving people? The quote today is, becoming rich is hard, staying broke is hard, choose your hard. And that was said by Worre. He's not a person I know, so hopefully I'm not butchering his name, but I think of that a lot of the time. Choose your hard, right? Mm-hmm. What's harder? Mentally getting yourself prepared to go out for a long run, going out for the long run, getting those sneakers on, choose your hard, right? Just do it.
Or the recovery after the run, right?
Yeah,
I mean, these are all decisions, and they may play into your decision to even get started. But you've got to choose. You got to choose which. It's good. Something bad is going to happen depending on how you look at it. You're either not going to get healthy because you refuse to run, or you're going to get a little bit of discomfort because you're going to go run and you're going to take some time and do all these other things. They're both hard. It's hard to live in both of those scenarios. But to your point, you got to choose which hard you want to live in, right?
Yep. So choose your hard. Yeah. And then the action step is gain some awareness. Really just start by scrolling through the last 3 months, 90 days of your spending habits. Where has your money gone? So you can choose where you want it to go in the future. And then start writing that zero-based budget, which is what we spoke about today. Or if you choose another one of the methodologies, use that. But just start doing it. In the resources section, we are going to have the cash flow planning. So as you're going back that 3 months, you can plug in some numbers that you can use when you write your first zero-based budget. And we're going to give you a template for that as well. When you use those templates, just make a copy of them, create a new document, and go to town. Have fun with it. Try to not look at this as a chore, as something that you're going to dread, but as something that is going to fire you up and empower you to change that ripple effect that goes forward, that moves forward.
Yeah, focus on your why when you're doing this. If you can zero in on what you get out of it, right? So what do I get from this activity? Well, long term, I get financial freedom, right? Short term, maybe it's the putting on the shoes and the recovery from the run. But long term, I'm a runner who can run a marathon, who's healthy, who's going to live a longer life, who can play with their kids, right? If we use that metaphor, you become a better version of yourself by doing this activity. And as a household unit, you become a better version of your family tree by pursuing this activity. And then your generational impact, your kids and their kids all benefit from this effort. So for me, that's the big why, right? Is that long-term looking forward down the road. Why would I put any effort into what I'm doing now? I really get nothing from this personally, except for some satisfaction, because I think about the impact that it could potentially have. And why do I implement it in our own household? Because I don't want my son to go through some of the challenges that I went through. I want him to learn, but I don't want him to struggle. I don't want him to, fall into some of those same debt type of traps that I fell into as a result of not being prepared. If we can get prepared, we'll still have, those traps are always going to be there, and we'll probably fall into some of them. but you're going to be better prepared to get out, and they won't have as big an impact on your life. And you'll have a vehicle at a minimum. You'll have a way out. So define your why and let that be the motivation, that hopefully helps you, encourages you to take the first step, start building the budget. And like Christine said, use 90 days, build a budget. If you're doing it on paper, just write down expenses, and then try to write it down again and organize them into categories, and try to get them into as few categories as possible. Make it something that's manageable. And if you use the tools and resources, or even just open up your bank's online access portal, and go into your account services side and see if there's a budgeting tool there, because a lot of times banks have their own versions of these where you can just click on the goals tab and there's a budget option, and you can have it build its own budget, or you can go in and you can customize a budget. So start with the easy way, right? Hit the button and say, make me a budget based on my spending patterns. And then it'll be. But
just remember, if you're using credit cards, right, it's not going to have all the information.
No, that's right. Yeah.
It's only going to have the information that's in there.
Build the debts into it as well. You'll have to add those. Absolutely. So if you have multiple accounts, you'll have to do this several times, but you definitely want to try to capture everything and just get started. So the resources are the two templates, right? And then we have a book recommendation, Budgeting 101. You want to tell them about that?
Yeah, from getting out of debt and tracking expenses to setting financial goals and building your savings, your essential guide to budgeting, by Michelle Kagan. And she's a certified public accountant, and she has a few other books that she has penned. So you may find some of her other titles also appealing and interesting to read down the road.
I have not read it, so I'll check it out. And, hopefully maybe even by the time this episode airs, I'll have read it, but we'll see.
Yep. Well, hopefully we have not overwhelmed you today, because we really are here to help you set yourself, your family, your household, and your future generations up for success. If you feel like you have dove in and you are trying to get through your first budget, your second, your third, your fourth, and you are wanting help, reach out to Donald and I. This is what we do. This is why we started this podcast, because we want to help people and we want to help you too. And remember, everything is for a moment in time. If you choose to take something out of your budget today, doesn't mean you're going to go the rest of your life without it. Think of it as, I am doing this today. So that ripple effect that we talked about it's bountiful. You have that foundation, you have the security, you're able to give generously because you have created and you follow a system that works for you and your household.
We've heard it all before, right? Short-term pain, long-term gain. So make some adjustments. I've heard people say, I can do anything for a year. So if you could make a sacrifice, pull back for a year, what kind of impact would that have on your financial position? What kind of debt could you pay off and eliminate from your budget? And remember that when you stop paying a debt, you start paying yourself back that same amount. And so you're not just freeing yourself of a debt, you're actually getting yourself a bonus at the same time. And I think oftentimes that might get overlooked, and a lot of people just kind of saddle themselves. So definitely, make sure that you're looking at this the right way. You're taking all the variables into consideration, and start small. Just start small.
And if one of your whys is because you want to own a home one day, our next episode is going to be right up your alley, something that you're going to want to check out.
Single biggest purchase most of us are probably ever going to make. And we want to go into this with eyes wide open, fully prepared. We're going to do our best to, give you as much information as we can. We certainly don't promote any of this as being the only way or even the best way. It's just our way, right? And but we do have some rules, and one of those rules is we want to get you into the right home, and we want you to be able to pay that home off as quickly as possible. We want you at the end of the day to own your home 100%. We don't want any debt in your portfolio. Now, biggest purchase most of us are ever going to make. So are you doing this in a couple of years? Absolutely not. Some of these plans out there that you're going to see promoted that get you, reverse the mortgage and pay back and move money in and out of equity in the home. I'm not going to say they don't work mathematically, but they're complicated and the penalties are huge. So be careful if you navigate into any of those strategies. But we're going to talk about some of that stuff. And the goal is to get you in and out of that loan, that mortgage, as quickly as possible. And the only way we can do that is to go in with fully armed with as much information as we can, with a plan that we can manage, and to get you into the right one. And so we're going to give you some tools and some parameters to help you make that decision.
You said it. That's where we're headed next. Yeah. It's been great filming this episode with you, Donald.
Yeah, as always, it's been a lot of fun. And hopefully we make a little impact out there. Somebody hears this and is able to apply some of these tools. And like Christine said, if any of this feels like it's just too much or you don't know where to get started, that's what we're here for. So reach out. Oftentimes we can do a no-cost consultation and just kind of get you started, right? And we're happy to talk with anybody about most anything. And if there's something that's in your way and you just need to talk through it, that's what we're here for. So you'll find that that's a lot of times where the conversation gets started. You just don't know where to start or how to get past this first barrier. And then once you can, then it's okay. Well, now what do I do next, right? And how do I keep going? And that's where we found the most value as coaches is just helping people kind of move some of these obstacles out of their way. And it takes time, right? So we just want to let everybody know that we're here to help and that we know that this is not a change that anybody can do overnight. And so you just want to make sure that you go in with the right mindset and you give yourself room to fail and opportunity to grow.
All right. Until our next tactical episode of season 2, take care.
Until next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Off Limits.
Beyond the podcast, we are money coaches who want to help you.
So if you are looking for help managing your money, use the links in the description below to contact either of us and learn how coaching can help you thrive.
Lastly, please help us to spread the word by subscribing, leaving a comment, and sharing our podcast with your friends and family.